Before this story begins, subscribe to the channel because every week we bring you unforgettable Nordic love stories inspired by the beauty of Norway. Some people say destiny is written in the stars, but this love story was written in the silent snow of Norway, where a single knock on a lonely cabin door changed two lives forever. Winter had wrapped the Norwegian fjords in endless white, and the mountains stood like silent guardians beneath the calm northern sky. A lonely cowboy named Ethan had traveled farther than he had ever imagined. He came from the wide-open plains of Texas, where the wind carried dust instead of snow, but after a wrong turn during a mountain journey, he found himself completely lost in a freezing wilderness. His horse was exhausted, the daylight was fading, and every breath felt colder than the last. As snowflakes covered his jacket, he spotted a faint light glowing through the trees. It was a small wooden cabin resting beside a frozen lake, surrounded by tall pine trees. Gathering the last of his strength, Ethan walked toward the cabin and gently knocked on the old wooden door. A few seconds later, the door slowly opened. Standing there was a beautiful Apache girl named Ayana. Her long dark hair rested over a warm knitted sweater, and kindness filled her eyes. She looked at the stranger without fear, only quiet curiosity. Seeing how cold he was, she stepped aside and invited him inside without asking many questions. The warm fire immediately chased away the freezing air clinging to his clothes. The cabin smelled of burning wood, fresh bread, and hot herbal tea. Ethan thanked her with a tired smile while removing the snow from his boots. Ayana handed him a warm blanket and placed a steaming cup into his hands. Neither of them realized that this simple act of kindness would become the beginning of a love story neither could forget. As the evening settled over the fjords, they introduced themselves. Ethan spoke about Texas, horses, and endless golden fields, while Ayana explained how she had chosen a quiet life among Norway's snowy mountains after years of traveling with her family. Outside, the wind howled through the pine trees, but inside the cabin, everything felt peaceful. Hours passed as they shared stories, laughed at their different worlds, and slowly discovered they had more in common than either expected. Ethan admired her courage and gentle spirit, while Ayana saw honesty and warmth behind the cowboy's confident smile. For the first time since arriving in Norway, Ethan no longer felt lost. Sometimes the longest journey in life ends exactly where the heart was always meant to arrive. The morning arrived quietly, as soft sunlight reflected across the frozen Norwegian fjord, covering the snow with a golden glow. Ethan woke to the comforting crackle of the fireplace and the gentle aroma of fresh coffee. For a brief moment, he forgot he had ever been lost. Looking through the cabin window, he saw Ayana standing outside, feeding a pair of wild reindeer that had wandered near the trees. Smiling, he joined her, and together they walked across the untouched snow, leaving only two sets of footprints behind them. Every step brought them closer, not only through conversation, but through the silent understanding that sometimes words were unnecessary. Ayana showed him hidden trails that overlooked the magnificent fjords, frozen waterfalls, and ancient pine forests that had stood for centuries. Ethan shared stories of riding horses beneath endless Texas sunsets, while Ayana laughed and admitted she had always dreamed of seeing a land where winter never arrived. They teased each other about their different worlds, yet every difference seemed to draw them closer instead of pulling them apart. As evening approached, they returned to the cabin, where snow gently fell outside while the fire warmed the room. They prepared dinner together, laughing whenever Ethan failed to cook the traditional Norwegian meal exactly as Ayana instructed. After dinner, they sat beside the fireplace, wrapped in quiet comfort. Ethan removed his cowboy hat and placed it on her head, making her laugh so hard that even he could not stop smiling. In return, Ayana carefully wrapped one of her handmade wool scarves around his neck, telling him that every traveler in Norway deserved something warm to remember the mountains by. Hours passed as they spoke about dreams, fears, family, and the strange ways life connected people from opposite sides of the world. The silence between them became as meaningful as every conversation. Outside, snow continued to blanket the mountains, making the cabin feel like the only place that existed. Then, everything changed. The peaceful evening was interrupted by the sharp ringing of Ethan's satellite phone. His smile slowly disappeared as he answered the call. The voice on the other end brought heartbreaking news. His father in Texas had become seriously ill, and his family desperately needed him to return home immediately. Ethan lowered the phone, unable to speak. His heart was torn between duty and love. Ayana understood before he even explained. She gently reached for his hand, but neither of them could find the right words. The warmth of the cabin suddenly felt colder than the snow outside. Ethan looked into her eyes, knowing that the journey he thought had finally ended was forcing him to leave again. For the first time since arriving in Norway, he feared the road ahead more than the storm that had brought him there. Ethan stood silently beside the cabin window, staring at the endless white mountains that had become more than just a place on a map. They had become home because Ayana was there. The phone call still echoed in his mind, reminding him that his father needed him in Texas. He knew he could not ignore his family, yet every moment he imagined leaving Norway, his heart grew heavier. Ayana walked toward him with quiet grace and gently took his hand. Neither of them tried to hide the sadness in their eyes. Sometimes love understands that goodbye is necessary, even when neither heart is ready. The following morning arrived wrapped in fresh snow. Together they saddled Ethan's horse and packed his few belongings. Every small movement felt slower, as if time itself wanted to delay their farewell. Before stepping outside the cabin, Ethan reached beneath his jacket and removed the silver necklace he had worn since childhood. It had been a gift from his late mother, something he had never taken off. Carefully placing it into Ayana's hands, he closed her fingers around it and whispered, "Keep this with you. I will come back before the snow melts." Tears filled Ayana's eyes as she held the necklace close to her heart. She smiled softly and replied, "The snow never truly melts here. It simply waits. Just like I will." Ethan kissed her forehead one last time before climbing onto his horse. The wind carried tiny snowflakes through the silent pine trees as he slowly rode away from the cabin. Ayana remained standing at the doorway, watching until he disappeared beyond the white hills. Days turned into weeks, and weeks became months. Winter slowly gave way to spring across much of Norway, but high in the mountains, patches of snow still rested quietly beside the fjords. Every morning, Ayana touched the silver necklace and looked toward the same trail, believing promises made with honest hearts never disappear. Far across the ocean, Ethan cared for his recovering father while working every day to save enough money for the journey back. Not once did he forget the cabin, the warm fireplace, or the girl who had opened her door to a stranger lost in the snow. Then, on the first morning of the next winter, the familiar sound of horse hooves echoed through the valley. Ayana stepped outside, hardly daring to believe what she heard. There, riding through the falling snow with the same warm smile, was Ethan. He had kept his promise. Without saying a single word, they ran toward each other and embraced beneath the quiet Norwegian sky, knowing that true love is never measured by distance or time, but by the promises two hearts refuse to break. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this Nordic love story with someone who still believes that real love always finds its way home.